Hello and welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Fulbrighters, where we bring you the best and the brightest minds. And today we have Dr. Sarina Shirazi with us, who has an MS in economics from North Carolina State University. And she's currently the head of Department of Social Sciences and Business Management at TMUC. How are you doing, Dr. Sarina?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Azad. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. You have a very interesting story. So let's just jump straight into it. Apparently, as you mentioned, you're the first woman in your university's history to show up at the university with a 6-year-old child.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's my favorite story to tell. And I think that's what made my journey so interesting. And I'm so thankful to the Fulbright program for it because, I'm a single parent and I have for the full custody for my son. He was only 6 when I was given the Fulbright. And when I landed in NC State, I went to North Carolina State University and I was given a very warm welcome. I missed a flight. I was supposed to be there on Friday. I got there on Saturday. It was a holiday. And yet all my friends from the Office of International Students were there to pick me up still on a holiday. And they picked me and my son up. And I was just about to take a cab. And somebody came running up to me and said, "You're Sarina, you're Sarina." I'm like, "Yes, I'm Sarina." So they put us in their car and they, took us to the place where we were supposed to be. Lived in a place called E.S. King Village. That's the graduate housing for families in NC State. And when I went and I got there, the head of OIS, my very good friend now, Lauren Ball, she and Pam Robinson Cook, who used to volunteer with her for all the international students, they were both there with goodies and toys. And I was very surprised. I said, okay, that's very nice. And maybe that's a tradition that they do for everybody. And they do, obviously. But the toys were a shocker. So they told me, no, it's because in 125 years, we're going to celebrate our 125th birthday for the university this time. And till this anniversary, we've never had a single mom come to the campus in family housing with a child. And that was so nice. It was such a good start. And that day after that, I think the life of me and my son were completely transformed, and we've had a lovely, lovely time.
What a heartwarming story. I wish if I could go on a Fulbright again, I'll go to North Carolina State. I went to Brooklyn College in New York, and what New York is famous for, nobody came, nobody cared. I had to take care of myself.
No, they were so good that, after that, I volunteered for every student orientation that ever was. I was a student orientation volunteer, and they later made me a member of the student orientation committee for the international students. So, and I also got to look after, mashallah, 200 families from all around the world. Wow. I think about more than 100 countries, people living there and their families. And I was the resident advisor for a while, and it was a great experience. And I think I just got to give very little back to the community. But mainly they were very, very kind to me.
No, I mean, it's brilliant. A lot of times, especially in a country like ours, we sort of have cutoff dates. And even when we talk about the Fulbright program, there might be a perception that it's for young people. It's just something that's available for young people. What would you say to those people who maybe look at the Fulbright ads, maybe look at the awareness campaigns and think it's not for them because they have a child or they're past it and it's just for 22-year-olds?
So when I went for the Fulbright, I was 32. And I actually got a Fulbright a year before that. Something went wrong with the admission process. It was deferred for a year, and actually I applied for an MS. And the interview committee told me that you should apply for a PhD. We want you to go for a PhD. So I applied again. So that 3 years, I went 3 years ahead of the time that I had in my mind. But I think the timing was still perfect. And so I'll say to everybody what I heard Rita Akhtar say the other day. She was giving everybody tips on how to apply for the Fulbright. And she said that there's no age limit on the Fulbright program, but then you should have enough years on you to give back to the community. So when you go for a Fulbright and you're doing your PhD or your MS and you're coming back, you should be in the age bracket where you can actually contribute to society and give back to the society. So I think that's one criteria. But per se, I don't think there's any age limit on it.
Yeah, but I think the problem with perception in society is, as somebody who a couple of years back turned 30, once you turn 30, people just assume that's it. That's you've lived your life now.
Yes, that's how you feel on the night of your 30th birthday. But when you wake up the next morning, you're the same person. You're not haggard. You don't have lines under your eyes, and so no. I think a few days after the birthday, you're already like, I'm the same person I was 5 days ago. So I don't think that should really keep you from studying.
Did you face that at all in terms of overcoming that perception when you're thinking about submitting your Fulbright, or are those considerations that you've never taken to heart?
So I started submitting for the Fulbright. The first time I started to submit for a PhD program was because I was working for 10 years, and I just started working at like 23. And the first time somebody wrote me that reference letter, I'll still remember the gentleman, and I would really like to thank him. He was the director for academics at NESCOM. I was working for a constituent organization of NESCOM, and he was the head of the training directorate. And the gentleman told me, he said, look, I want to sign this off for you today. But Sarina, you are not going to get a scholarship for another 5 years. So bear in mind, you are not going, if you want to do a PhD, there's one thing that you need, and that is resilience. You are not going to give up. So even if it takes you 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, do not give up. And I think recently there was somebody who applied so many times for the Fulbright. I think the 9th time the guy got in. So there are examples like that. So you should never, ever, ever give up. And I didn't give up. I started applying. I applied for the evening. I applied for everything. But for me, I would like to say this out loud, and I tell this to my students and my colleagues. And since the time that I've come back, I have convinced so many people to go on a Fulbright, and they have gone on a Fulbright. Many of them have also completed their PhDs by now. And I always tell them, don't give up. There's no age limit. And I also find the Fulbright to be the most transparent thing, because I never had to. I took a GRE, I took the TOEFL, I applied, and they just called me. So, in other scholarships, people kept telling me to go and check on what happened to the application. But for the Fulbright application, I didn't check on the Fulbright application. They called me, I went in for an interview. They asked me a few questions. I think the whole experience was great. It's enriching just to be in that room with so many, qualified people sitting there, considering you for that spot. So it is totally worth it. And I just think you should never give up. And so my motto in life is, if I can do it, you can do it too. So don't be afraid of the GRE.
I mean, you had done a lot. You were already the regional manager of Asia Pacific for a brand before going
Yes,
on a Fulbright.
yes.
So as somebody
Yes.
who would quite well accomplished in a great position, I think most people would check out at that point. What made you decide that I'm doing well in my career, things are going great, but I'm meant for something better? I need to, change tracks, take this huge risk, and trust myself.
So when I graduated, I think we were in the top of the class. Me and my friend always thought that we'll do some more and we'll study a little more, but you know how life happens, and then you get cut off and things like that. So I rested for a year. My mom wasn't feeling too well. She was very unwell, so she was bedridden. I had to look after her. After a year, I got into work. I was the regional manager for Asia Pacific and South America, and I was also working on some of the work on the J-17 Thunder project. I'm very proud of, and it was phenomenal work. And after 5 years of my service, I was supposed to be promoted, so there was no way of finding out. Although I was doing I think everybody was very happy with me, and I was doing a brilliant job, as per what they told me. But having said that, I was a little curious, and I wanted to know if we call them our annual reports. My annual report was good enough. So the guy at the training section was a friend. He said, you know what, you should apply for a scholarship. And that way you'll know where you stand, whether you have good reports or not, and whether you're going to easily, breeze through and become a manager for the regional post. And that's when I applied. And I said, okay. So I applied and I got a scholarship. I came on top of the list and I started studying again. I didn't get a full time off because I was working. I was traveling extensively throughout Asia. I was, it was crazy. But studying and doing some research, it actually brought back a lot of nice memories. And it just reminded me of how much I enjoyed academics. So that side just flared up, and I was like, maybe I can apply for a Fulbright. And a friend of mine joked to me and he said, you know what, now that you're done with this, you should apply for a Fulbright. And I did. And he was on a Fulbright at that time. So, yes. Ali, so that's my friend Ali Kamal. So yes, he also takes credit for my Fulbright. He called me one day and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I just given the final exam and I don't know what to do. And he said, I'll apply for a Fulbright now. And I did. And it happened and everything and then Fulbright was something that was hard for me to refuse. So it was an opportunity for me to go and grow and see the world and,
Life has a way of working out. So if somebody who is a professional, and there are a lot of professionals who are listening, who might also be considering, but might also think that, like you mentioned as well, that you know it all when you think you're in upper management, and then to go back and start afresh. What do you feel the Fulbright added to you and your repertoire, considering you were already doing well in your career?
So I was doing pretty well in my career, mashallah. And alhamdulillah, I was at such a good post. And I had been around the world and I had, there comes a time in your life when you say, I've been there, I've done that. I was actually at that stage when I was so young and yet I had been there and I had done that. And all the projects that I was given were very successfully executed. I made friends. So this was an opportunity that would actually take me away for 2 years or 5 years actually, because I was given a PhD scholarship, and take my son and live with him and have an independent house and my own kitchen. And I'm a single mom. And I talked to my mom once and I said, if you don't mind, this is what I want to do, because it's so difficult to live independently in Pakistan, And mashallah, my parents were, all healthy and hale and hearty. So I didn't have to worry about them. They were young people at that time. So my dad was still in service. And so my mom said, by all means, you should go ahead and do it, live it up, go see how it works out and see if you like it. And so I went there with my son, stayed there. I got to learn so much about myself, who I am, what I like, what I dislike, how I want to function in society, how I want to be more inclusive, and how I want to teach my son the things that I've learned while I was there. And my son got schooling there because he went into first grade. So his first, second, and third grade were there. It had a great impact on him. It has actually made him a writer. He writes a column he's 17 and he writes a column for the news, for some of the newspapers. He calls himself a freelance columnist. So I think or that credit also goes to and he writes about US politics. Wow. Because when we went, it was the time that Obama was being re-elected and he was made a part of the voting thing in the school. And, so nice. I think it was a great opportunity. That's what took me there. I just broke off from everything and it was like starting a new life and living on your own. Even if sometimes, like in the end of the month, you don't have enough money and, you can only have ramen noodles and that's what you're surviving on, and you go home and you find out that your friend next door got you biryani and you're like, wow. Oh my God, I'm so blessed.
That's what I'm still surviving on, but my next door friend does not get me biryani. I'm still on instant noodles.
Yes, so they say you shouldn't live in New York. I heard somewhere that they say that you shouldn't live in New York for so long that your heart gets so I don't know,
in love with New York.
In love with New York, yes, but hardened, and not so long in North Carolina that you go all mushy. So there has to be a balance. So
I think
I would have to say very mushy. It's back
I
there in
think
North Carolina. Very
I think
nice
we're
friends.
treading a fine line at this point. The New Yorker in
Very
me
fine.
will look to
Yes.
defend my state at least for a couple of years. I think it's a misnomer that New Yorkers aren't nice. Anytime anything goes wrong, the way New York comes together for each other, I don't think any other place in the world.
No,
Again,
that's
I'm biased.
phenomenal because
I'm 100% biased, but that's what I felt.
yes,
It's just we don't have time for niceties. If you actually want something done, get in touch with a New
yeah, just
Yorker.
get it done. I know.
Yes.
So when I went to New York, it's actually a very nice place, a very friendly one. I went to New York for just 2 days, and a friend of mine called me and he said, "How can you just stay in New York for 2 days? You won't even be able to see this place." So 2 nights turned into 5 nights, and we had a whale of a time. It was lovely. It was a great place, and we loved eating in New York. Obviously, well, all sorts of food, obviously. But
I was there for 2 years. I've gone back. I still feel like I haven't seen all of New York. It's just the best place in the world, according to me. For people who are listening,
I agree.
who do have children, are thinking about the Fulbright. What are some of the modalities? What are some of the struggles? Or is it not as hard as they would assume it is?
So the Fulbright program has a rule that they don't let you take your children or your spouses in the first 6 months, which is sort of kind of, I would agree with the rule. I had an issue because I was the sole I had sole custody and I had to look after my son. But so it's difficult to settle down because after a month and a half, the homesickness starts to kick in. And that is exactly the time that the academics gets rigorous. So I think you get a little depressed, the fall comes in, how you feel during the whole, Thanksgiving period. And
Winter blues.
exactly. So everything starts to pour in on you, and there's a lot of load on you. And being a single parent, I had to time myself around my son because he used to leave at 6:30. I used to leave immediately for the university. I had to rush back at 3:30, get him off the bus, get him into the house, get him to eat something. So the Fulbright rule that for the first 6 months, if you can go and settle down yourself, or if you can get some help or somebody to go with you to look after especially your child, is definitely a great idea. I did not have that luxury, but I think in the first semester, you do need a little time to settle down. So no, it is not really a piece of cake. It's good to have help. The rule that they've made is sensible. As I told you, was under compulsion. I actually had to tell the USEFP here. I actually had to talk to Rita back then and Grace Clark was here then, and I asked both of them that I will not be able to go if I don't take him. So it was, either or situation. It was a really tricky situation, so they let me do it. But otherwise, I think it's a good thing that you go there, you settle down, and then you bring your family and your spouse or your child, or spouses are still elder people, they understand, but it's difficult, it's hard on everybody.
And in terms of schooling, there are no issues in terms of getting enrolled.
So in terms of schooling for the kids, I was fortunate because I was living in a part of the city, and the ES King housing that I told you about, the graduate housing, I was on campus. The public school that my son went to was known as AB Combs Leadership Magnet School. So the leadership magnet schools are like the best schools, but you can only go to that public school if it is the one that is sort of joined to your adjacent to your location, right? So everybody can't go there. I was fortunate enough that coincidentally that was one of the best schools, and he got to go there. But other than that, I think if you have a child who is above 5 years of age, schooling is not an issue. Schooling is free. You have to look after their insurance, their health insurance, but schooling is free. And for me, the schooling experience was excellent. He's a changed person. So, they groomed him really well.
If we now talk about your schooling as well, how is the degree itself?
The degree, well, the degree was so great on so many levels. when I went there, I had in my mind, I thought I would be a microeconomist. I always thought that that's my forte, and I want to do a dissertation on microeconomics, and this is what I want to stick to, and But once I got there, one of my seniors, he was a South Korean. He told me, he said, don't restrict yourself like this. Just have an open mind. And he was so right. So I did my specialization in international trade, and I also got a minor in statistics. I completely fell in love with statistics. I used to spend more time in the statistics department than I ever did in the economics department. So, my perspective was changed. My approach towards learning was changed. I was encouraged to ask questions. I was always encouraged to ask questions. I've always been blessed with very extremely fine teachers all my life. It's just been I've been blessed like that. But especially over there, you're allowed to ask a question and say, why am I studying this, or why is this concept so important, why should I waste time even listening to it. They taught me all of that, which I think translated very well into the teaching that I did when I came back. So when I came back, I started teaching, and I used to tell my students that when I'm teaching you a boring statistics concept, please ask me, what good is this going to be? So, so it completely changed my perspective. It was very nice. I think I know what academic rigor is now. I'm better. I adapted to the pressure. I knew how to take the pressure. I knew how to string together different subjects and look at things in a multidisciplinary way, which is still very difficult for people here in Pakistan. But I think they gave me a very multi-dimensional outlook towards life, and towards, especially towards academics, and how different things can, you can mix and match, and you can research on those too.
So what
So
made you
yes.
what made you decide to go into academia and teaching as opposed to going back into the field after coming back?
So yeah, Shazad, when I was on the Fulbright, I had an accident.
Oh.
And I broke my spine in a few places. So yes, which is why I was given some medication, and I lost my retention power. And which is why I had to come back earlier. I had gone for a PhD scholarship, but I came back with an MS, because although they told me that you can come back, and I told them I don't know if I'm going to, remember things. The best I could do was, in a 4-hour paper, I could write 100%, give 100% correct response for 2 hours, and the next 2 hours I'm blank. I just didn't get it. I could just
I'm
not
so
remember
sorry that you
anything.
had to go through that.
Yes, no, that's all right. That's all. It's just part of life. I don't take it like that. So the thing that pulled me to the academia was, when I came back, I said, if I started my PhD, I have to see it through. So the best way to see it through was to stick with academia. So I joined as an assistant professor, and here in Pakistan, and I started teaching. I used to revise my work at home and go and teach economics and to MBAs. That's how I started. I started teaching economics to MBAs, and then statistical inference, because I had a minor in it, and then research subjects and other subjects too. But I used to prepare at home and not take a book with me. That's how my retention came back. And then I re-enrolled for a PhD, and then I finished that PhD, and then now I'm done. So that's what brought me. I stuck to the academia, because मुझे लगता है कि I think रिस्क के हलाल कमाना, आप जब आप सुबह उठते हैं और आप रिस्क के हलाल कमाने की नीयत छूटते हैं, तो that is वो सवाब है. And I also think that studying is jihad, and it is also a good thing to do. So if, and I enjoy it, so why not?
I mean, it's brilliant. You're also creating future Fulbrighters who will come back and create their own impact, who will have their own journeys. I mean, your journey itself is so phenomenal.
Yes, my very good friends have gone for a Fulbright. I'm so proud of them.
Yes.
And myself.
I mean, it's quite inspiring. I really do hope some people listen to this and they decide to go on their own journeys after listening to this. What are some of the things that you learned as part of your Fulbright experience that you've brought back, or do you also teach to younger kids when they are going on their own Fulbright journey?
So I learned, I think the most important thing that I learned on my Fulbright was volunteering. So I never thought I wanted to volunteer. I always thought one should volunteer, but I didn't know how to. the Fulbright taught me how to volunteer. I was also the vice president for the Fulbright Association in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we got to volunteer a lot. We worked with the Women's Center. We worked with other, you know, other groups as well. So I did a lot of volunteering. That's I think that's the greatest thing that they've taught me. And when I came back, I actually trained the trainers on mitigating and the impact of violent extremism. So I did this volunteer activity for peace building in Pakistan when I came back in the schools and some of the the worst hit areas in Rawalpindi actually. So I think the best thing that I got to learn was volunteer, volunteer, and volunteer, and then how not to discriminate, how to live and let live. You know, because when you're alone, you can think for yourself and you can look around. And I had all sorts of people around me, and how to love the diversity in the world. So I just love that. I got the opportunity to love a diverse group of people, and I still have it in me. And that was the phenomenal part. And you know, just by looking at me, my son just also sort of got it. So you know, and when I meet other people, I always tell them that you should live and you should let live. And I also tell them that when you go on a Fulbright and you come back, you must always tell other people that if I can do it, you can do it too. So I think that's one thing that people always say, oh, the Fulbright is so difficult. And they forget to tell them that, you know, I also went on a Fulbright, and I'm a human being like you. So if I can do it, you can do it. So I think encouragement and volunteering and just loving the diversity that God has created.
It's a snowball effect. Everybody who comes back creates their own impact. It inspires others. They create their own impact, and you don't even know when that snowball turns into an avalanche. In the best sense of the word, nothing
Yes,
disastrous
that's
about
right.
it. I mean, you've had a great journey. It's been so inspiring. And as you even mentioned, the things you've brought back, it always comes back to the idea of the Fulbright experience as opposed to just the degree. And most of what we've discussed today is about your Fulbright experience. So maybe a great place to end this would be, what is a great memory from your Fulbright experience that you still cherish?
So my greatest memory from the Fulbright experience is that I went on a Fulbright. On a Fulbright, we had a Fulbright get together in Colorado. So we went to Colorado for Fulbright reunion, and I think that event and really changed my life. And I think that was the best thing that ever happened. It was a nice break from everything. And the other event that I would really like to mention here is I went to Bretton Woods. You must have heard of Bretton Woods, where the IMF and the World Bank and everything was made. So nobody ever goes to Bretton Woods, and there are still no signals in Bretton Woods, by the way. So I got to go on a conference to Bretton Woods, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It completely changed my perspective. It was like I out of a fairy tale. So I lived the fairy tale. That's, I think, going to Bretton Woods was the best experience that I had, and I went on the world's largest zip line too, which I'm still afraid of. But
Wow.
so Bretton Woods was the highlight of my Fulbright experience.
Wow, that's amazing. Every time I talk to Fulbrighters, I'm a little envious when I hear about their Fulbright experiences, because I'm like, these are the things I've missed out on. But goes to show there's so much to do in the world, and there's so little time. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. If you can just leave a message for everybody who's listening, to prospective Fulbrighters who are listening, who are a bit on the fence about applying, how will you inspire them and ask them to apply?
Well, I would just say that you have to be, resilience is everything. You have to be very resilient, and you will not know that you're resilient today. You will know it in the next 10 years. For resilience, you need consistency. Please be consistent. Do not give up. Do not give up. Never, ever give up. So I think that's what I like. And please live and let live. And just do your best. Do your best and let it be. And the most important thing for the Fulbright, people make a lot of applications, everything, they don't apply. Please push that apply button.
Wow, go for it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Thank you so much. I feel inspired. I'm sure all our listeners do as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarina, for sharing your experiences with us. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back again with another Fulbrighter talking about their journey. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.